from Google Meets, we would be popping up all over the place on it. So, you know, but not much.
Why don't we do this? Because it's already after 10 o'clock. Let's, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we may switch around the agenda items to wait till Tom gets here.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, remind everyone to identify themselves before they speak so that those who are not on the video but are on just the audio will know who is speaking.
Okay, well, that's a good idea. So I'll start by saying I'm Larry Fox and I'm the chair of the board. Let's call the meeting to order, and we've noted that we do have a quorum. And so the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from January 8th.
Bob Rinker, so moved.
Second, Alfred, second.
There's a second. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Hang on one second, folks. I'm just checking one thing.
And Al Bertolini, are you?
Yes, I abstained, wasn't at the meeting, so.
Okay, and I'm on board. I was muted.
Well, I wasn't either. I'll abstain too, David.
Thank you, Brenda.
Okay, so we had some abstentions. We have the first minutes have been approved, and the next item on the agenda is a report from the Contested Solicitation and Awards Subcommittee. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Bob Rinker. As I reported to you at our January 8th meeting, the subcommittee had received a contest from American Dream Clean regarding an RFP issued by DAS and a subsequent cleaning contract for 2 state buildings at 24 and 38 Walcott Hill Road in Weathersfield. The subcommittee had given American Dream Clean until January 11th to respond to DAS's response to the contest filed by American Dream Clean. American Dream Clean claimed that DAS had not provided them with information it requested through a FOIA request, being a Freedom of Information request. DAS stated at the meeting on January 11th that it was working on the FOIA request of American Dream Clean. And then on January 13th, in order to meet our statutory requirement of issuing a decision within 30 days, the subcommittee voted to dismiss the contest without prejudice. We did so in issuing that decision, but with the specific requirement that American Dream Clean, once they received the information from DAS, would have 14 days to file another contest if they so desire. So on about January 15th, 2021, DAS provided documents related to the information request. And on January 22nd, 2021, American Dream Clean filed a new contest with us regarding the same RFP, regarding the same cleaning of the 2 buildings that I previously mentioned with you. On January 27th, David forwarded that material to DAS, and yes, no, sorry, I'll take that back. That David forwarded that material to them on January 26th, and DAS responded quickly to that. And on January 27th, we provided that information to American Dream Clean. On January 29th, we had some additional questions from the committee that we submitted to DAS. And on February 1st, DAS responded to those questions by the subcommittee. And then we sent those questions and responses to American Dream Clean. So we have not yet heard back from American Dream Clean in regards to the responses, both from the questions that we asked and from the response from DAS. Our committee has until February 21st, which happens to be I think a Sunday, to issue a decision. So we'll have to do something before that date. So in summary, we disposed of one contest and we got another contest regarding the same matter. So that is my report, and I would leave it open for either Stu or Bruce if they want to make any additional comments on my report, and be happy to answer any questions.
Bruce, Stu, anything to add?
No.
No, good job, Bob.
Any other comments right now? Okay, thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Larry.
Any other matters before that committee?
No, I think that just the one is good enough.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not, encouraging people at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bob. And thanks to the committee too. The next item on the agenda is the privatization contract committee report, and we haven't had a meeting in the last month, and there are no matters currently before that board, before that committee. The next issue on the agenda is work group reports, and first up is the audit work group. Tom?
Yes, thanks. Tom Ottoman here. We have two agency reports that are before the board for acceptance, and I will get to that at the conclusion of my report. I'd like to say that we cleaned up our backlog, so the letters from former years and the compliance reports and issues, letters have gone out, and they'll all be out by today. So our backlog has been cleaned up. We have 4 reports that we'd like to elevate to the board for their review, probably with a vote coming next month. That would be the Office of Health Strategy, the Office of Policy and Management, the Division of Criminal Justice, and the Workers' Compensation Commission. So those compliance reports will be coming to the board for your review and a vote of acceptance next month. We do, again, there's a couple of common threads that keep coming before the audit work group, and I'd just like to bring them to the board's attention. There are no cost effectiveness evaluations for master contracts. And I think that might be something the board wants to look at. And maybe there's a tickler we could work on with DAS for master contracts so that CEEs would be put in the pipeline. Maybe not, but I'm going to just throw that out to the board for its consideration. When looking at the Office of Policy and Management, I'd just like to report to the board that the OPM is really quarterback distributing funds to all the agencies, and they operate under a lot of MOAs and MOUs. They do have a very strict policy for results-based reporting, which we find very interesting and enlightening. But we'd like to see possibly the results-based reporting utilized more. So we're seeing an underutilization of that particular regulation, or what you would call a guidance. I'm not even sure what it is, but I'm just going to put that out there to the board for its consideration. Also, the BizNet functionality just shows competitive bids. It doesn't show all contracts. As we all know, there's a new system coming in, so DAS is launching a new system to replace BizNet, and I would just like to, sort of advise the board that we should be looking at this new system to make sure we are going to be looking at all contracts and not just competitively bid contracts, because there are still quite a few contracts behind the scenes, MOAs, MOUs, and other things that they're not reported on BizNet currently. So I bring that to the board. That's my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if not, Larry, you can certainly take a vote on 2 of the acceptance of compliance reports. That would be for the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station and the Department of Aging and Disability Services.
Thank you, Tom. Before we do take those votes, are there any questions or comments from board members? Hearing none. Okay, David, how do we want to do this, the acceptance?
This is David Gay, one at a time. So take a vote on the Department of Aging and Disability Services, and then take a vote on the Agricultural Experiment Station. The Agricultural Experiment Station documentation is still to come. But if Tom will back me up on that, it was a clean report, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, yeah, with all the usual suspects and the standard recommendations, if you will. Tom Oneman.
Okay, so can you frame the motion for us, David? It's a motion to accept it's a motion to accept?
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion?
Motion to accept, Bob Brinker, motion to accept the report of the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station.
Tom Oneman, second.
Any discussion, further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The report is accepted, and then I'll entertain a motion on the Department of Aging Disability Services.
Bob Brinker, so moved.
Is there a second?
Albert Lane, second.
Motion's been made and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Tom. Motion is accepted, is passed. Next we have, I don't know if we have a report, Al, from the Data Analysis Work Group.
We certainly do. Morning, everybody. A couple of things. The benchmarking study with the University of Connecticut, which is a nationwide study of procurement in the public sector, is on hold. And quite frankly, the requirements, the data requirements are quite significant in connection with that. And you have to do this with the aid of digital analysis, and our pursuit of this. It's our understanding that the state does have a STAR system, which is data analysis software that can go into the core process and extract this kind of data and sort it and respond to various queries. We're in the process of trying to identify the technical resources to the committee to help us get the technical know-how to get access to this data. So in the meantime, that benchmarking study has been put on hold. Now, the group has a number of issues and other items that have come to our attention that certainly represent great opportunities for us to get involved. And we've tried to narrow this down, and we've tried to prioritize them, and we've come down to about 5 key issues. And I'd just like to go over those briefly for the board to certainly solicit any input from the board as to, is there a priority? Is there something within these 5 that we should bring to the top of the list? But let me go through them very quickly. First item on the list is kind of an issue that's been around for a year. It's the 3-year procurement plans that every agency had to present to OPM at the beginning of 2020. And that was a new legislative requirement that each agency had to project forward for 3 years what their procurement plans were. And that was a new process. And even though that plan was supposed to be furnished to the Standards Board at the beginning of last year, it was a massive undertaking of OPM to get that information from the various agencies within the state, look at it, correct it, and get a document which is the intent of the legislation. We have still not received that, and would like to pursue that we get that. It should be in by this time. It should be, the information should be cleansed. It should be good. It should be a good indication or a good look at what the state procurement plans are for the next couple of years anyway. the 2 years and remaining on the 3. And it's our intent to look at it to understand agencies' plans for competitive versus non-competitive, so that we can take a look at that and see if there's anything we can do about that or needs attention prior to implementing those contracts. So we're in a position of looking ahead and dealing with what the plan is versus coming from behind after it's all done and say, oops, this should have been something else. So it's a great opportunity for us. We have to be a little patient because it's the first year this has been done. But now I think we're probably in a position where we've got the information, and it probably would make some sense for us to get into that. The other issues, and let me just run through them. I mean, they're all important. They all deserve attention, and we're a volunteer board and have limited resources. But the second item is the impact of the government's order to suspend competitive bidding on COVID-19 related procurement. Now, you understand the governor has the authority to bypass the procedures in connection with the emergency dealing with the COVID. The group would just like to get our arms around that, and determine the size, the scope, what's in, what's out, and get an idea of the implementation of that to make sure that it's certainly within the spirit of the order of the governor. Third item on the list is with all the issues with the quasi-governmental agencies that are rising, the group thought, hey, maybe it's time for the data analysis group to do a complete study of all the quasi-governmental procurement being done by the by these agencies. Again, we're finding issues, and maybe that's symptomatic of the fact that we probably should get in to see if it is systemic across several agencies or not. So that's on the list. The next item is review of the MOAs and MOUs, memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement, which are separate from the contracting process. Usually it's done within state agencies or state-related organizations. That's a whole area that we'd like to get into, understand, make sure that it's, again, in the spirit of appropriate procurement. And the next issue was the auditors had a finding about a year ago where a state contractor, I think it was an IT contractor, an agency was having trouble. The agency wanted to go in and allow the agency to look at some of the underlying cost records of that contractor, which is a contract provision in almost every contract that the state does have that ability to do. There was pushback by this particular contractor saying, no, we'll let you in if you pay us for the assistance in you taking a look at our records. So the auditors made a finding of that. It just seemed in conflict with contracting standards of the state, and where the auditors perhaps they can identify the issue, but I don't think they had the legislative ability to do anything about that. I think maybe the standards board should pick up that issue, pursue it, and make sure that it is resolved appropriately in a manner which is beneficial to the state. So those are the issues. A lot of items. It's just tough with our small group trying to decide where is our biggest impact. So certainly any thoughts or additions from the board would be helpful in our process, and certainly we'd appreciate those. So that's my report.
Thank you, Al. Are there any comments from board members about Al's report? I have a few, but I want to see if other board members want to comment first. Hearing none, this is Larry Fox again, the chair. Al, or David, do we know, actually, I know the first item that you mentioned, Al, was the report on that OPM was supposed to assemble. As you mentioned, it was new legislation. I think our board had something to do with that legislation getting passed. And do we know whether the OPM has actually assembled that report? Do they have it, or is it still in the process of being put together?
Well, we don't have recent information. In the first quarter of 2020, we made a few contacts with OPM, and they were in process. And that's when the COVID issue came up, and just everybody was straight out. And this was a new report for the agency, very comprehensive report. So it was a struggle to get the information from the agencies and screen that information and make sure that it was appropriate and right and responsive to the request. We have made a couple of attempts, light attempts during the year to ask the status of that. And basically it was still in process. So here we are a year later. We're in the first year of the 3 years. So I think it's appropriate for us to go back at this time and push to get the response.
Yeah, David, I wonder if we could send a letter about that, or follow up. Maybe we don't need a letter, but follow up with OPM, because I viewed that at the time, we viewed that legislation as potentially very powerful for us changing the behavior proactively of agencies around competitive bidding. And I know we've got the pandemic, but I hate to let that slide, because it's much easier for us to see in advance whether an agency intends to competitively bid something than it is for us to undo it when they haven't. And I think the report was due a year ago, isn't that right, Al?
Yeah, January 1st of 2020.
20, yeah. So we're now in 2021.
Right.
So can we, David, can we check on that?
This is David Gay. Yes, absolutely.
And that's a great list. I love all the items on your list, Al, but I mean, I would and maybe we can do more than one at a time, but I would love to see us be able to tackle really an analysis of that report if it's due. And then I'm particularly interested in the third item on that agenda, which is becoming more and more occupying our time, which has to do with digging deeper into the quasi-publics. That would, I don't know if other board members have views of that, but if we had to prioritize, I would look at those too. Any other comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Al, for that report. The next item on the agenda is the report from the Special Committee on the Connecticut Port Authority. You'll recall that last month we designated a special committee which includes myself, Bruce Buff, and Lauren Gauthier, and our intern Julino Nano and David, to look into the Connecticut Port Authority complaints that we have, and also a complaint about Mira. And we've done a lot of work on that in the last month, and we do have an update. David, do you want to chair this section of it, or not chair it, but
Facilitate it, David Gase.
facilitate? Yeah.
Well, let me report that, we focused at this point in time on the Connecticut Port Authority. We will focus on the Materials Innovation and Recycling Authority, MIRA, next, but we did focus first on the Connecticut Port Authority. Now, the special committee took a four-pronged approach. One was the review of applicable statutes, and that was assigned to me. A look into the gateway contract, and that was assigned to Bruce. And a look at the concession agreement, which was assigned to Lauren. And of course, Jolena did all the compilation of our records, kept us all on track, and performed the interviews that we had decided upon that we wanted to do first. So I can report that I have concluded my review of the applicable statutes, but I'm still seeking clarification on the extent of the board's authority as it deals with the Connecticut Port Authority. Though I've concluded my review, I still need some clarification, and I've been I've been in contact with the AG's office and looking for a response from them, and have not received it as of yet, but it's only been a few days since I put in that formal request, because as you know, we met earlier this week as a special committee.
Do we want to get reports from each of the folks on the committee?
I think that would be wonderful, Larry. David Gay again. So I would, next on would be the look we did into the gateway contract, and that would be Bruce Buff.
All right, thank you, David. This is Bruce Buff. I initially looked at the, there was a consulting agreement between the Connecticut Port Authority and Seabury Maritime, since it seemed to encompass questions and concern relative to the new London Pier project in general. Now, this agreement was executed on May 15th, 2018, and provided for Seabury, a venture capital company, to perform strategic advisory services and financial advisory services, including review of phase 1 requests for qualifications, development of an RFP to identify an operator and or developer of the state pier facility, including but not limited to a
Bruce, you just froze on us.
qualified terminal.
Bruce, you're still frozen. Is he frozen on everybody, or is it just
Yes.
me?
I think I'm back now. I think I froze there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you did.
All right.
Go ahead.
In any event, this contract was interesting. Seabury was paid $219,500 plus out-of-pocket expenses. And in addition, the contract included a provision to pay Seabury a success fee to assist the authority in arranging for closing a transaction. I didn't know what that meant. The amount totaled $523,000. We've asked the CPA what this was, what the fee was for, and we wanted to see the specific calculation for coming up with this amount. We have not yet received a response. My question is, was it a reward? Now, it's difficult for me to understand why it's necessary or advisable to pay an additional fee to a consultant as a reward for providing a service which they are already paid. Now, apparently, Seabury also provided procurement services for the RFP issuance and reward. They apparently sat in on negotiations, though they were not included on the evaluation team list. Seabury is a venture capital firm, and it's difficult for me to understand why the Connecticut Port Authority paid this company over $700,000 to provide procurement guidance. Now, as an additional note, sound procurement procedures require that evaluations of prospective bidders include identifying if any of them had a conflict of interest, and this clearly was not performed. Now, we looked at the harbor development agreement, and this was the agreement between the Connecticut the CPA, Gateway New London and Northeast Offshore, and it was executed on February 11, 2020. Now, I didn't look at whether or not one potential bidder was provided an advantage over another, since I didn't have actual details of that, nor did I look at which bidders may not have provided proposals due to the perception that one bidder may have had an inside track. But I did look at the contract's provisions. The first concern I had was that the contract contains no penalties for missing key dates, nor does it contain any incentives for beating milestones and budget constraints. Another concern I have is that apparently there was no provision made for a project manager to manage this project, which should be ideally within the Connecticut Port Authority organization. There was a mention in the contract that the CPA would be given weekly updates by their contractors, but this is insufficient for the successful completion of a project of this magnitude. I've seen projects go off the rails in a day. As a result of these and other issues, significant cost overruns and missed milestones have resulted. And I don't know if I'm stealing anyone's thunder, but you know, every time we look into a quasi-public agency, whether it's CRDA for Dillon Stadium, the Connecticut Port Authority for the New London Pier Project, or MIRA, we find the same issues: questionable behavior, lack of oversight, lack of accountability. None of this is in the best interest of the people of the state of Connecticut. So I believe it's up to the state legislature who created this mess to fix it. And that is my report.
I've got a treat for you guys today. I'm here with
Thank
my
you.
friends Larry and Katerina. Earlier last year,
They need to mute themselves.
Next would be, Mr. Chairman, David Gay speaking. Next would be the look at the concession agreement, and that was handled by Lauren Gothier.
Thank you,
Lauren.
David. This is Lauren Gothier. So I took a look at the concession agreement between Gateway New London and the Connecticut Port Authority based on the RFP that was issued June 7th, 2018. And then I compared this against the RFP and the response. So it was 3 documents really I looked at. The RFP, like I said, was issued June 7, 2018. There was initial deadline for responses August 10th, and then a subsequent amendment pushed out to August 31st. So in structure, it's a financial backer of Gateway, which who ended up responding to this. I looked up their establishment date because there was some questions about all these hedge fund kind of managers coming in to back this this port manager. They were established as a business entity in Delaware on July 28th, 2018, and they got their RFP response in by August 24th. The reason I really looked at it was all of the documents in the concession agreement were signed by the co-CEOs of Instructure. That's Philip DeMontini and Matt Satnick. So I am just a little curious about the timeline there on when the RFP was issued, the extension that was given, and then also the establishment of a business entity responding to such an RFP, especially when one of the key factors was the experience of the respondents on this RFP. Which I'll just note that Gateway was given a 9, where Logistec, the previous port manager there, was given only a 6, even though they'd been there for about 20 years. Going into the actual concession agreement, it was a little bit difficult because there were large portions that were redacted from the proposal from Gateway, as well as key areas that were redacted within the concession agreement itself from the FOI materials we received. So it was a little bit difficult to track exactly what was going on between their response to the RFP and what ended up in the actual concession agreement. Very curiously, there was even a definition that was redacted, and it would appear that that term, whatever term it was or word, was redacted throughout the rest of the concession agreement. and in one of those sections, that particular term or word and was being used to assess fees in the middle of a 20-year contract. So it seemed there's a time target of 12 years placed on the implementation of something, and how that would relate to how fees would be assessed based on the something and the corresponding operations of something. So it's interesting that this isn't being able to they're not able to disclose what they're doing with this this kind of business plan, but it's also going to directly impact how the state is assessing fees on the concessionaire. There's also a specific value placed on some type of feasibility study being done, where apparently the Port Authority is agreeing to conduct a feasibility study and will only get partial reimbursement for it, not to exceed $74,000. I'm not really sure where this feasibility comes in. It wasn't really included in the RFP, nor the proposal, as far as I can tell. And then whatever they're studying is also redacted. So that was a little questionable. As far as the actual objectives of the RFP, there were 8. I'm not going to list them here. But, you know, Gateway's overall proposal tracks with some of the key objectives as far as increasing overall cargoes, both existing and new, through the New London port, not redirecting it to their New Haven port, utilizing the rail network, which is down there. But like I said, it's very difficult. The business plan that was submitted in Gateway's proposal was about 17 pages long, and they redacted 14 of those pages. So being able to track how they actually responded to the RFP and what's actually in the concession agreement was difficult. And we all are aware that there's a wind deal kind of wrapped up in this, but very little is actually said about a wind energy company or wind power operations in the proposal or in the concession agreement. You know, the only really part that is seen in the proposal is, you know, it's in no way our intention to shift current business from the state pier to the Port of New Haven unless Bay State Wind requires us to do so. So it acknowledges that the Bay State Wind project is going to potentially disrupt and significantly impact other users at the state pier. Even from their proposal, they kind of recognize this, but that wasn't necessarily acknowledged or built into the concession agreement, where continuous, or, you know, several times over, it says that they're going to get all different types of users. They're going to increase cargoes, new cargoes, existing cargoes. And, you know, they're required to maintain sufficient cargo facilities, quote, on a public, non-exclusive basis and upon reasonable terms throughout their 20-year concession period. So that it would look that the concession agreement did match the RFP. But like I said, if a large part of this has to do with wind-powered energy, there's very little in either the proposal or the concession agreement that addresses that. And as far as the rail goes, so that was also a concern, is what's happening with the rail facilities down there at the port. Since they're being removed, it appears the responsibility for the maintenance and repair and improvement of Central Vermont Rail is kind of shared between CPA and the concessionaire in this agreement. There's other sections that require use and promotion of rail facilities, which would satisfy one of the objectives in the RFP. But as far as the concession agreement seeming to comply with the RFP and the rating of the proposal itself, you know, there was a stronger preference for the Gateway proposal. The main issue lies in what the concession agreement is saying and what is being reported to be happening down at State Pier, especially, you know, with other users being excluded, with cargoes being redirected to the New Haven port instead of being brought through New London. We've seen plans where they're going to be filling in the sections between the piers to create kind of like a mega pier, you know, ostensibly for this wind power company that's coming in. But, you know, that's kind of outside what I was looking at just with the actual documents. But, you know, being that State Pier is a public asset, Connecticut Port Authority is a government entity, state of Connecticut's pledging millions and millions of state dollars to this deal. You know, there definitely needs to be more transparency. There needs to be much clearer, bolder lines between the relationships of everybody involved here. The financial backers of Gateway, the operators of Gateway, any wind power companies that are coming in, and the actual members of the Port Authority and the Port Authority board. It's unfortunate to see that there's a monopoly that's probably going to occur on the use of this port. I'm not sure if that's in the economic benefit or best interest of the state or the surrounding area. Just overall transparency needs to be built into here. And there's not a lot to be said within the agreement of controls on performance and that sort of thing. So just overall, I think like Bruce pointed out, with quasi-publics, this seems to be a recurring theme of transparency of what kind of relationships are happening in the background of these RFPs before they're issued, and how state assets are being managed. Are they being kept public, or are they essentially being given over to private entities for their own use? And I'm from southeastern Connecticut. I can actually see State Pier from my front window. So kind of being down here and understanding the history of what happened in New London with the Fort Trumbull neighborhood, it's very concerning that it appears that the state is kind of going down that same path with promising a lot to this big company and getting very little assurances in return. So that's what I found.
All right. Thank David Gay again. Thank you, Lauren. The last piece, of course, was Jolena and her compilation of records and her interviews. Jolena, do you wish to say a few words?
Thank you, David. This is Jolena. I will keep it very brief. My work focused on conducting 30-minute to an hour-long interview with members of the public who raised complaints regarding the CPA before the board to identify their top areas of concern. The comments from the interviews with Mr. Blacker, Mr. Frixell, Mr. Farley, and Mr. Olson were shared with the board members tasked with this initial review and the executive director, David Gay. Additionally, my work included gathering and reviewing supporting documents. Thanks.
David Gay, once again, Mr. Chairman, I hand it back to you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the members of the working group who we've actually put in a lot of hours so far into this, and it's, as you can see, scratches the surface. I don't know if the board members, there's also, I know one of our board members, Brenda Cisco, sent the link to a forum that the Transportation Committee had just on January 29th, where they devoted 2.5 hours to talking about the Connecticut Port Authority. And David can send you that link if any board members want to take a look at it. It's very informative about context and issues. So we put a lot of time into this. A couple of things that have come up that David referenced it, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it too. I want to say that we've had a significant amount of cooperation from the current folks at the Connecticut Port Authority in our requests for information. There's more certainly that we want to get, but there's a lot that's been provided. And that's appreciated. The board knows, I mean, there was a huge problem at the Port Authority historically, and there was a major shakeup at the Port Authority. I'm going to get my exact years and months wrong, but the initial the management and the staff of the Port Authority that was involved in the initial RFPs have basically been replaced. And OPM and DAS stepped in major ways to try to clean up and to improve the management and functioning of the Port Authority, so so a lot has been done to try to correct what clearly were some bad, and I would argue corrupt practices that occurred. There's a new executive director, David Kooris, who's not executive director, chair of the board, excuse me, and there's a new executive director that's just been appointed to the Port Authority. So it's important for the board to understand that a lot of action has been taken to try to correct some of the issues that have occurred here. A third thing that I want to say is that when we look at this, I'm very mindful as the chair of the board to be clear about what the lane of our board is. Because there's an incredible amount of passionate feelings, particularly in southeastern Connecticut, but not just in southeastern Connecticut, really across the state. It's obvious when you listen, if you listen to this forum, about how people feel about this project. And our mission at the Contracting Standards Board is really to focus in on the procurement practices. And there's a lot of issues with the procurement practices. But it really is not our mission to get caught in whether the actual policy decisions that are being made in the direction that's being taken by the Port Authority is one that we would take or agree with or not agree with. That's really not relevant for us. What is relevant for us is how are these authorities or agencies doing their procurement? And are they doing it consistent with the statutes? Are they doing it consistent with the obligations? And there's a lot to look at in that. But it also is interwoven with a lot of feelings about whether the, how that port should be used or not. And some of that is really not in the purview of our board, although we each probably have a lot of feelings about it. So I'm mindful that we need to stay in our lane. And our lane is an important lane, which is the state utilizing the best possible procurement practices for these kinds of endeavors? And David made a reference that he uncovered in looking at the statutes that's important for our board, and we don't have a determination yet. I asked David to check with the Attorney General, because one of the things, as David mentioned, that we needed to look into that we wouldn't normally do is look into the actual Port Authority statutes and what's their mission and what's their authority. And nested in that statute, and I don't know if we have any legislators listening into our board meeting today, it's section 15-31B15. It is the Port Authority statute. And when the Port Authority was created, there's language in that statute which talks about, I'm gonna read part of it, but obviously they have the authority to invest in, acquire, lease, purchase, own, manage, hold, dispose of real property and lease, convey or deal in or enter into agreements with respect to such property on any terms necessary or incidental to carrying out the purpose of these sections. And then that makes sense. They're really in charge of they're the chief maritime advisors for the governor, among other things. And then it has a section in there which says, provided that those transactions, which would include the kinds of agreements that we're talking about that are subject to the complaints that have been sent to us. Provided such transactions shall not be subject to approval, review, or regulation by any state agency pursuant to Title 4B or any other provisions of the general statutes. Now, there's one proviso that isn't relevant for us. But in other words, it seems like they have specifically been given an exemption to review by our board. That's an unusual provision, and it's very significant in my view in a number of ways. And I'm not an attorney. We don't have an attorney for the board. That's why David, when David uncovered this, I said, look, we need to really ask the Attorney General who assists us for an interpretation of what this means in terms of our authority. Now, we clearly have the authority to make recommendations to the governor and to the legislature on proper procurement policies, no question. But it calls into my mind whether or not one of the alarms we need to send up to the legislature is whether or not it's in the interest of the state, whether it's in the public interest of the state to strip the Connecticut Port Authority of the kind of accountability that our board could provide, and the kind of redress that our board could give. And the fact that there have been the history at the Connecticut Port Authority points to the fact that problems can and do arise when you don't have accountability. I mean, the interventions that OPM took over the last few years are testimony to that. And so we may or may not have the authority right now to go deeper into the port. We need to get that decision. I want the decision from the Attorney General. I want to know that more clearly. But it raises a big issue about whether or not the legislature needs to take a look at these carve-outs, because have we at the altar of nimbleness stripped accountability from these authorities? And is that really what the legislature had in mind? Or did they not clearly understand the implications of it? So we are waiting for an opinion from the Attorney General on that, and from the Attorney General's office. But it's a factor as we look into the Port Authority. I'll open it up. I see there's some hands up, David, from other board members.
David Gay, I believe Bob Rinker had his hand up first, and then it's Stu.
Thank you, Larry. And I also want to thank you personally for not putting me on this committee to study it, because it is a tremendous amount of work that looks to be done here, and very important work that needs to be done. I just want to kind of go through a little bit of make sure that I understand this, that we paid a company to put out to bid for qualified terminal operator, we paid a company in excess of $700,000 to conduct the RFP to choose, I believe the company is Gateway. And as I understand it, Gateway is the company that manages the terminal in New Haven, right? I mean, they could have driven 45 miles down the road and found a company, as opposed to, I think they could have rented a jet and gotten down there quicker to find out. So I thought that was rather odd in terms of Gateway was there. And I also think that there was, and I've been reading all the stuff that has been coming in, Gateway operates that, and they also operate a salt shed, which was a controversy on the New London Pier.
On the pier,
Right.
right.
And so I'm like, okay, so that is Gateway. So I think that is significant, but more importantly, of the issue that was raised, why did Gateway have to go out when, in fact, the pier had previously been property of the DOT? And so they could have said to the DOT, because we talked about earlier, these MOUs, they could have done an MOU with DOT to help them try to find an operator and not have to spend $700,000 to do that. They could have gone over to the fine people at DAS and asked them to do that. With the tape that was given to us by Brenda Cisco, it looks like they are going to be working with, on the construction, was what I was able to glean from the tape, was that they're going to work with the Division of Construction Services in terms of the project management. Well, this is what happens when you say nimble, when you have a 6-person agency, right? How can you do anything, right? I mean, I wonder, as you said, what does it mean to be nimble, Larry? Having 6 people trying to run an operation of all the ports, you know, you're going to have to contract all this stuff out, as opposed to having people that have the expertise in order to be able to do that. So that was kind of my comment on Gateway and the amount of, frankly, public dollars that were spent that did not need to be spent on that. The question that we have before the AG, I know we've asked them for kind of an opinion, and I wonder whether or not we really want this to be a formal opinion from them, in that, does the State Contracting Standards Board have any authority over procurement engaged in by the Connecticut Port Authority? And when I was looking at that, as David gave his report, for example, let's say when they did their contracting out bidding, what happens if there was a contest? What happens if the existing bidder said, hey, wait a second, there was something, wrong going on in the background? Would they be able to file a contest with the 4E36, or is the authority that the CPA has is unchallengeable, right? That they couldn't come to us with that. Let's say, I also, there's 2 other points that I would make relative to the opinion, is that we as a board have the authority under section 4034 to terminate contracts. Is that authority from us been superseded by the creation of this? And I think that's very important, because if somebody knows that there's not somebody being the watchdog agency over them, and they can't be challenged in any way, how is that accountable to the public and the taxpayers? And then finally, and this was in a prior life of mine, that my understanding is that this is a public-private partnership.
Right, that's what I wanted to say.
That is being done. And there's a statute, a Connecticut General Statute 4261 (c) that says public-private partnerships need to be submitted to the State Contracting Standards Board under 4E16, which is the privatization contract, for our review and approval. Is in fact this public-private partnership that is going to happen with the wind, and I've lost count of how many groups and names there are involved in that. Does this statute mean that we're not going to review it? Because at the time the statute was passed, one of the things that the Malloy administration talked about was development of the state pier, but that there would be a review of that. Did we then subsequently pass a statute that said not anymore?
I know.
We're not going to review that. So I think it's important, and I will defer about whether or not we should seek a formal opinion from the AG on these matters relative to our authority. And then I would like to make one last comment. I'm sorry to take up some time. I received from David something called that talks about in an agreement, something called a minimal scope. So it's like, if we can't go big, we can go small. And so I'm like saying, what kind of contract is that? You know, I can build a big, wonderful big pier, or I can build a dock. I mean, I don't understand how you can enter into a contract that either you're going big or you're not going big, right? And if you're not going big, wouldn't you just put that back out to bid to do that? So I give the committee a lot of good luck. I wish them the best on this. But the one question that I do have is relative to should we have an opinion that is formal from the AG specific to the statutes that we're supposed to be enforcing relative to this, as opposed to our own interpretation or, quote, an informal opinion. That's my comments, Larry, and thank you all for bearing with me as I went through this.
Larry, could I?
David Gay speaking. Larry, I believe Stu Mahler has a comment.
Yeah, I'd like to build on what Bob is saying. Unfortunately, we don't have an attorney that works for the State Contracting Standards Board, and generally in these situations, we kind of get an opinion, although I don't know what the opinion will be. You know, it will be sort of like on the one hand, and then they say on the other hand, so they don't give you a definitive reasoning. They'll give you and the way the statute can be interpreted. So I'm not sure whether it really matters in this case, whether it's informal or a formal opinion. But I'm willing. You know, Bob knows these things a lot better, having you know, in his prior life dealt with the Attorney General's office. And I just want to say that I was pleasantly surprised by Larry's comments regarding the authority of the State Contracting Standards Board in this instant. I think these conversations, you know, the conversation today were excellent. I also want to point out that a bill has been filed in the legislature, proposed House Bill 6194, and that concerning the competitive bidding and oversight of quasi-public agency contracts. So the legislature has gotten involved in this area, and it says to create transparency in the awarding of quasi-public agency contracts by requiring them to be subject to competitive bidding and subject to more oversight by, guess what, the State Contracting Standards Board. So there are concerns there. I'm sure there are concerns of the legislative body in London. There's probably concerns by New Haven. And this is something that we really shouldn't be moving forward so quickly. Apparently, without really looking at what the authority is of the state of Connecticut into. And I hope that, I'm not sure whether what's going to happen to this bill. It was referred to the Joint Committee on GAE, Government Administration and Elections. So I just want to bring that up, and that's something that we want to really monitor. In addition, hopefully, the budget will have funding for us this time, and that we will see some some money so that we could hire additional staff, and including an attorney. But I just wanted to mention that and bring that up while we had these two excellent conversations. And I agree with Bob that this issue of public-private partnership is in the statute and something that really should have been brought to the attention of the State Contracting Standards Board. That's all I have to say.
David Gay again. Thank you, Stu. And it would not only be nice to have the staff, but I think it actually is critical that we have the staff. We're going to pause here for a second because I did get a text from our chairperson who had a frozen screen and is rebooting his computer. And hopefully he'll let us know when he's back in, so that everyone will just stand at ease for a moment while we wait for Larry to get back in. I see that we have a hand up from Lauren Gothier and a hand up from Bob. So as soon as Larry gets back on board, we'll go from there.
I lowered my hand, David. Okay.
Me too.
Maybe I should be like, this is David Gay, like T. Clark Hull, who during the Republican convention was chairing it, and he decided to speak and sing, and ended up being nominated for lieutenant governor.
I'm back.
You're back. Excellent.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. So my whole computer froze, and I had to, reload it and everything. So I'm sorry. Bob, you were in the making your final comments. I don't know where we were after that, David.
Stu made a comment just supporting some of Bob's comments, and then speaking about one of the bills in the legislature. And I believe Lauren now has her hand up.
Okay, Lauren.
Yes. So, I think it's important to point out that Jolena did a lot of great work looking at all of the statutes for all of the quasi-publics, because it was brought up in our meeting when we started discussing the specific carve out. It seems that a lot of the language has been boilerplate, and I had noticed previously that the newest quasi, the Paid Family Leave Authority, has the same carve out, and then Jolena went through all of them. So thanks for going through that. So I would just request that, David, when you speak with the Attorney General's office about an opinion on what our authority here with this particular quasi is, of course, the immediacy is on the Port Authority, but if we could get a clarification on all of the quasis in the language that are in them, so that we can move forward and make the necessary recommendations to the governor's office and the legislature about purview and that sort of thing. And that's my only comment.
Well, I'd like to take that maybe a step further, even than that Bob had made this. I think actually, I don't know, David, whether we need a motion for this, but I think it would be good to have a motion from the board for a formal opinion, because I want a formal opinion from the Attorney General about our authority. First, with respect to the Connecticut Port Authority. And I think, secondly, the other quasi-publics. The Connecticut Port Authority is most urgent, and I have if it's going to take them a year to give us a report on all the quasi-publics, I want to make sure we get this as soon as possible. I think it's important to have a formal opinion because it will formally tell legislators what they need to do if they want to have this kind of accountability or not. And an informal opinion doesn't quite rise to the level of seriousness that I think the moment requires. Because I don't know that legislators, when this language went in, understood that what all the implications of it were, and if they did, okay, or maybe we're reading it wrong, and maybe we have more authority than we have sufficient authority. Maybe we do. I want to, but I would entertain a motion for that David asked for a formal opinion from the Attorney General about this board's authority with respect to the Connecticut Port Authority, and then secondly, with other quasi-public.
Lauren Gothier, so moved.
Second. Second.
Is there discussion on that motion from board members? And all those in favor?
Lauren just put her hand up,
Oh, I'm
Mr. Chairman.
sorry.
David Gay.
Yeah, so my only discussion point on this would be, would it be within the board's interest at some point to create a committee specifically to look at the quasis and any recommendations we would have for the legislature and the governor's office, as a whole kind of structure within our general government? I think, we keep getting tied up in these investigations of individual authorities, but it appears to be some sort of issue across the whole system of them that definitely needs to be looked at, especially in regards to how they interact with the procurement standards of the state as a whole. I mean, goes back to your initial question, what is NIMBLE? And is NIMBLE bypassing these and not having any type of oversight authority over them? I think these are broad range issues that the board could have, something to say about, because we do kind of have a more overranging view of all of the procurement policies and standards and operations throughout the agencies. So I just would put that thought out there, I guess.
Yeah, what I would say, Lauren, is that before we dive in, I'd like to get a response from the Attorney General, so I know what we're diving into. But I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying. But did we vote on them? We haven't voted on the motion yet. Are there any other comments? All those in favor of a motion that David asked that this board requests a formal opinion from the Attorney General with respect to our authority over the Connecticut Port Authority and other quasi-publics. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Are there any other comments from board members about this Connecticut Port Authority at this time? I don't see any. Well, I want to thank Bruce and Lauren and Jolena and David for the work we've put in, and there may be a lot more in front of us. The next item on the agenda is other business. Is there any other business? Lauren.
Lauren got there. Should we just give an update about Mira, since that was lumped into our investigation as well?
Yes, I thought David did at the beginning. We focused on the Connecticut Port Authority, and we're going to be focusing next on Mira. That's the update. Thank you. Any other business? Then the next item on the agenda is public comment. David, I'll ask you to help manage that.
I don't see any hands. If anyone wants to speak up, please.
Hi, it's Alyssa Peterson from Hartford.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, board members. once again, I'm sorry that there aren't other taxpayers either. I'm listening right now. I'm sure there are other people viewing, but by far and above, for any government nerd, this has to be the best meeting monthly as far as what's learned on behalf of taxpayers or what's done on behalf of taxpayers. It's extraordinary to me to listen to the depth of investigation and reporting done by unpaid board members. Really, so many of you have stepped up in the absence of staff, and I want you to know that I personally thank you for all the work that you do. It's such of the highest caliber. I would like to echo the sentiments of this morning that it is so important. I think Board Member Buff said it to begin with, to address the authorities. I really do believe that the authorities, all of them, need to be looked at. We're seeing this happen repeatedly too much as far as contracting and deal making. And I do believe, I understand that you need to limit it to procurement, but I think, quite honestly, that is where most of the problems lie, is how they are procuring things. And I would like to suggest a theme that I see being repeated, and that is former executive directors and board members have a shiny item that they want to acquire, on behalf or during their tenure. With the three that have been, discussed so far is, Dillon Stadium. They wanted to make it a stadium, not just improve it for, resident use, but they wanted to make it a stadium that would attract the Bob Crafts of the world. That's the Serta and Dillon Stadium. Number two, the Port Authority had this, it's a very wonderful idea to redo the port and redo the piers, but in the manner and use a world-renowned developer and Eversource. But and then the last item is Mira. They wanted the best, or what they thought was the best. They wanted Ritter and Cafaro on the contract. So every time these authorities reach for the shiny item, they seem to obviously get flawed or go around procurement processes in trying to obtain these shiny items or obtain these items for the residents of Connecticut. So I also thought Lauren's comment was critical about, or Board Member Gauthier's comments was critical about repeating the lessons learned with Fort Trumbull. Wow. If we are back again at that point, especially with the Port Authority, I think that's extraordinary. And I really do believe that the board needs to focus on procurement, on contracting, and the past sins of board members and executive directors. I do realize, I did listen to the new chairman, Kooris, try to deflect that there's no problems going on right now. But that doesn't mean that there weren't extraordinary problems that have brought about something like the Seabury Capital deal. To hear Board Member Buff's report, that's extraordinary. It's extraordinary information, and to learn of the abuses there. So to conclude, I echo that that you keep your you're under your purview of procurement. I echo that you look at all of the authorities. It's obvious they're trying to get out from under your review by putting these new statute language together. I want to congratulate you on, as we heard from Mr. Board Member Mahler about the new bill. Obviously, legislators are listening. They're realizing your importance, and they're realizing the importance of the review of contracting of these authorities. So congratulations on getting that legislation put forward. The last item is the AG. If it is found in the opinion that board member Rinker was talking about. If it is found that that you don't have purview for the moment on certain authorities, then I would ask you to have the AG immediately take over, because if the information you've learned is too critical, some of it sounds criminal, and the AG's office should really be doing a better job than they have as far as involvement and making changes. I thank you again for all that you do on behalf of the state of Connecticut, and look forward to next month's report. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you. Any other members of the public?
Yes, good morning. Is it my turn? I can speak?
Go ahead and just identify yourself, please.
Okay, my name's Michelle Farrelly, and I have to be honest with you. I kind of wrote down some things that I wanted to say today because I didn't want to leave anything out, but this meeting is pretty much blown my mind. You can tell, and I don't know everybody's exact name, but you can tell by what's being said and the sound and the way it's coming across that everyone pretty much gets a good idea if something's wrong. This is not something that's happening that is probably, how do I want to put, criminal, you can say, or whatever, wrongdoing. But anyways, I'm very happy that you all, participated in that group of people that have been interviewed and checking everything out. I know the work me and my husband do, that it's incredibly, it has taken over our life for probably 2 years now. So I know how long it takes to look into things and check things out. And we are so appreciative. And I'm only hoping that, you doing this, that it can turn into something and not be where you don't have authority to make something happen, when you find the exact information you need. But I'm going to start off with reading what I wrote today, because then this way I can stay on track. Okay, my husband is Steve Farrelly. He is the owner and operator of Driven Enterprise. I just felt you should all know a little bit about him, because this has literally, like I said, taken over our life. This has taken a toll on my husband physically, mentally, with all his workers. This has affected us, not ever knowing day to day what's going on, how we continuing as a company and as a business. But anyways, my husband's an amazing husband. He's an amazing son, father, grandfather, brother. But the funny thing is, I'm sure you all think you all have amazing ones too. It's not just family. My husband is amazing with his workers and his employees. You can ask any one of them that my husband is there financially, emotionally, when they're in need or they need something, or they've got to be out of work and they've got to take care of a sick relative. Before any laws came up that you have to allow that, my husband lets his workers do whatever they have to do to take care of their family. And any questions they're paid for, they are taken care of, and that is top priority for my husband. But besides that, you can ask over 100 plus of his customers, call anyone. My husband gives 100%. He takes care of whatever they need, whatever tasks they need. He gives them the best customer service. And this is why I need to speak up today. What's going on is wrongdoing, it's selfish, and I'm going to say greedy, actions from the CPA. It's false information they give, and it's got to stop. It's got to be brought into light. I listened to the meeting the other day. I actually sent a couple letters out to the people that were involved in the CPA meeting and David Kooris himself. Of course, not to hear one response back. More than once did Mr. Kooris, though he spoke well, certainly, knows how to use the right words, did not give the proper information, or you can say lie, about what he said. So when I forgot which man spoke about, we've got a new person at the, Port Authority, I'm saying to myself, really? Because I from the other day, and if you can come out and say a couple of lies and be confident, I don't believe anything he said. So I don't think we're out of the clear, and that we're all set. Somebody new, it's going to be totally different. I would hope so, but that's not what I see. Also, I want wanted to know that, this says, what is this? I lose track of it. Okay. Let me go into, all right, hold on. Okay. Also, the CPA, it has had many disturbing issues, as you said today. Though they were addressed, isn't it funny that they all happened around the same time that the new terminal operator took place and took over? They are allowing the private identity to run 2 ports in Connecticut, which, like someone said earlier, isn't that funny how much money is spent when literally they're down the road? I heard David Ford say over 300 businesses applied for that. But isn't it remarkable? Again, Gateway came into the winning, and maybe it's because they had a lot of insight to all of this, so they knew what numbers they could use and how to fit it. But anyways, it definitely brings up a monopoly into our state, and that would be a red flag. Why would that be allowed? How is it back then that wasn't a problem and people didn't stand up and say, wait a minute, I don't think we can have this. So what I want to say right now is that, you know what, I would like to be not forced out of, and the other businesses, out of the pier. They have a project going right now that's practically 43 million or maybe more over its budget. The minimal scope, which is ridiculous, is still on the table, 20 to 2 years. Okay, that's a big difference. The CPA won't even have the permits approved till maybe May or June. It doesn't even make any sense that everybody has to leave there right now when they don't even have any of that even panned out or know exactly what's going on. So what I'm asking today is if you can please write a letter to the governor and ask for the current tenants of the state pier to be allowed to stay at least the minimal until the permits are been approved or maybe not approved, until the minimal scope number has been found what it will be, whether it's 2 or 20, and until you finish your review on really everything that's going on before that they go ahead and move forward more and be kicking people out. The other thing I wanted to say is, in ending this, because I don't want to take too much time, it was interesting when you said you're looking for help for the Attorney General. I'm going to tell you, in the beginning of all this, we hired a lawyer because we knew, even though we couldn't prove it, that things weren't right. I have to tell you, the lawyer is a high, definitely respected, well-known lawyer that wrote antitrust laws and is in Hartford. We never heard back from the Attorney General. Now, we were stunned. And you know, the lawyer said the same thing. Don't even bother wasting your money. So you know what? I hope with ending that, you have a lot better luck than we had. Because you know what? He couldn't even answer us. And as far as legislators, I personally talked to a few. And you know what I get? They can't get involved. And that's exactly quoted what they tell me. So anyway, I'm hoping that you do a lot better, because you know what? This affects not just us, because of course it's affecting us. This is a personal issue. My husband's worked for 20 years, hard, you know, sometimes 90 hours a week, practically most of the time. And to think this is being stolen from him, and I get it if it's for the right, but this is not for the right. This is wrong, and this is criminal, and they need to be stopped. So thank you for listening to me, and thank you for your service. I can't tell you, between you, Kevin Blacker, a few others, the newspaper, David Kooris, John Lender, without people helping us, we would be out by now. We would have no business, and we would be bankrupt, and all of our employees would be out on the street also. So thank you, and I hope that you have better luck, and I appreciate it. You don't know how deeply I appreciate it. And I'm speaking today because my husband is still, could not stop even working, because we're forced to have to hurry and get this off the pier. So my husband couldn't take the time to speak today, and that's why you're hearing from me. So please, good luck, and thank you for, looking into this matter.
Thank you. I see Kevin Blacker's got his hand up.
You go, Kevin.
Hi, my name's Kevin Blacker. I wanted to start by giving a piece of advice to the Contract Standards Board that, and that advice is regardless of what the Attorney General comes back with. I think you should never let a law stop you from doing what is right. I think that Section 1531 B15 is clearly an attempt to take away, your power and oversight, and an opinion is opinion. Laws and policies are, set, decided, and tested by action. So anytime somebody tells me something that I don't believe is right, I don't ever let it stop me. I wouldn't let it stop you from challenging an opinion from the Attorney General. I think should not deter you from using Chapter 62, Section 4E7, which gives you the power to terminate or recommend for termination any contract. If a couple of conditions are met, one of them being wanton or reckless disregard of any state contracting and procurement processes by any person substantially involved in such contract or state contracting agency. I think that if you look at the leadership that made the state peer deal, which was Evan Matthews, Scott Bates, Bonnie Reamschneider, all of them documented in audits, forums, and the press, they had wanton disregard for, state contracting processes. I think that it should be no surprise that the Port Authority paid $700,000 to complete work that could have been done by a state agency or by themselves. This was the same agency that was hiring, $300-400 an hour lawyers to do menial office work. I know that, in his exact words, Chairman Fox said, he described the Port Authority, bad and corrupt practices. So there's been this big, story that David Kooris has pushed, and that the governor and others have said that, well, that was the previous Port Authority, and that is, they're all gone and we've cleaned things up. And first of all, that was the foundation. The foundation was bad, corrupt practices. That's what the whole deal was made on. That's what the whole organization was made on. And anybody that knows anything about building knows that the foundation is everything. If you have a foundation of bad and corrupt practices, nothing you build on it, no matter what you try to, do on top of that, is going to be good. I think that it's worth pointing out that at that Transportation Committee forum, there were allegations, last Friday, there were allegations by State Representative Connolly, who was on this call, and those, allegations and concerns were echoed by Senator Austin, and it was in regards to a legal RFP, where it was put out one way, they picked somebody, and then, changed it after the fact. And, Gateway, they said they'd do a lot of things in their concession agreement. They said they'd maximize rail use, but then they're ripping the railroad tracks up. They said that they agreed to operate in good faith with the longshoremen, but then they made them sign non-disclosure agreements to keep their jobs and fired them. That's saying one thing and doing another. It's a serious serious problem, and I can definitely appreciate Michelle Farrelly's frustration and angst. This for me, this is something that I have gotten involved in and refuse to give up on. For them, it's their life, and they're facing losing everything, losing their house. Steve worked like he worked as hard as anybody in my family, and it's not right that corruption, that a guy could work so hard and do everything right and have it all taken away from him. So I'll point out just how important getting them getting this in line is. There's serious consequences, if the government is allowed to, just do whatever they want and not be accountable to the people and to what's right. So I'll close with that. I thank you guys for doing the review, and I will keep following along.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, who's that? And identify. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me? I'd like to make a comment.
Yes. Go ahead. Please identify yourself.
Yes, this is Peter Olson. I represent the local 1411 that works out of New London and has worked out of New London since the 1930s. And we currently have about 65 people that have been displaced by this project. And even though it was given to an operator that's only 40 miles away, they have indicated they don't want to use us as labor down in New Haven. And so my members have been adversely affected, and we feel that they have given New Haven a monopoly to the state, all waterborne cargo, which is what we don't feel is in the best interest of either the Connecticut taxpayer or the Eversource ratepayer, this project moving forward. So that's all I'd like to say. I'd like to say thank you again for the board that held this meeting, and I think they did an excellent job in their research and presentation. So thank you, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? I don't hear anyone. David?
I don't see any hands up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Let me just see. Then I think I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Bob Rinker.
Motion's been made by Bob Rinker. A second?
I second.
Okay. We've got some seconds there. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next month. And David, we're going to follow up. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes, sir.
See everybody next month. Stay safe, please.
Thanks. Good job. Really good job.
Thank you.